My mother humiliated me for years and sabotaged my relationship by telling my girlfriend I was dangerous, so I made her the joke of her own birthday and started a secret war she never saw coming. My mom and I had a great relationship, except for the one thing that kept us apart, her need to put me down in front of others for validation. I tried talking to her about this. I've literally begged her in front of guests to stop embarrassing me for cheap laughs, but she just won't stop. She fully believes she's doing nothing wrong either. Last Thanksgiving, the whole family was talking about my uncle when she randomly started showing everyone my embarrassing teenage pictures. Pictures I'd explicitly told her I hated and never wanted anyone to see. I asked her to put them away, but she told me not to be a buzzkill and learn to laugh at myself. My dad stepped in defending her, telling me, "Would you relax? Your mom's just joking around. Let her have her moment." This is just one of the hundreds of examples. I've tried everything to get her to see my POV, but nothing worked, and a few weeks ago, my relationship with her went completely south. It was her birthday, and I woke her up with breakfast in bed and a new iPhone like she wanted. But instead of showing me love, she gave me a lukewarm thanks and started cracking jokes to my dad and her friends on FaceTime about how bad my cooking was. This hurt a lot. I had worked so much overtime to save up for that phone, and that's what I got in return. But that wasn't even the real kicker. The real kicker happened later that evening during her birthday dinner. She was doing her usual, joking about how I used to get bullied by a girl in elementary school to make people laugh, and I know I shouldn't have, but I decided to join in, willing to swallow my pride and become the butt of the joke for my mom's big day. This was a mistake. My mom took this as approval to do the unthinkable. She got everyone to quiet down, and when we did, she pulled out my personal diary. "Let's see what goes on in that teenage brain, shall we?" She chuckled. Everyone laughed, but my world went silent. My face went pale and I froze. And then, my mother said, "Ooh, look what he wrote here. I just got rejected by my crush and feel like a failure. I bet this will be funny." My dad was beside himself laughing, and just as my mother started reading, I snapped. I got out of my chair, stormed over, and mid-sentence yanked my diary off her. I looked at her in the eyes and mouthed, "How could you?" And for a second, I swear, I saw guilt. But that quickly vanished. My dad came behind me, yelling at me for being ill-mannered and shouting that I've ruined Mom's birthday. She then backed him up, telling me to learn to take a joke, and tried yanking the diary back. But I didn't let her. I just ran upstairs, tears streaming down my face. All the guests left within a few minutes. The party was ruined. I didn't speak to my parents for the next few days, and I planned to keep it that way until I was forced to, because that's when my mom stooped to a level I didn't know was possible. You see, I'd been seeing a girl I really liked for the past few months, but seemingly out of nowhere, she ghosted me. I found out after being stood up on a date where I waited over an hour for her, and when I checked my phone, I was blocked. I remember being broken. Julie had been my crush for over a year, and she brought me happiness like no other girl ever did. Mom knew this. I went home devastated, and when I saw my dad sitting on the couch, I just let it out. I didn't even care if he called me a wimp or anything. I just needed someone to talk to. But instead of laughing at me, offering advice, or anything in between, he looked at me like a deer in headlights, almost like he knew something. I picked up on this. I asked him if there was something he wasn't telling me. He said no, but his eyes told a different story. I kept pressing him, and it's only when I threatened to stop contributing towards rent that he gave in. He admitted that my mom contacted Julie and told her to leave me because she feared for Julie's safety. She told Julie I was dangerous, had anger issues, and made up disgusting lies about how I like to tell my mom the graphic details of what I do in bed with girls. She hammered down on this last point, embarrassing me and making me out to be a freak. My mom put on the waterworks in front of Julie, who became so scared of me, she just decided to never speak to me again. I went blind with rage when my dad told me. I stormed up to my room, where I kept exactly what I needed in case my mom ever took it too far. My dad kept asking me not to be mad, making excuses for her and saying I can win Julie back. But I wasn't planning on being mad. I was planning on making her pay. And when my dad saw what I was holding, he asked me to please be civil and think about this. But the time to be civil was over. Fast forward to next week, I was hosting a redemption birthday party for my mom to make up for ruining her real one. It was going great, until I got everyone's attention. I saw my dad start to sweat because he knew what was coming, but I had threatened him into staying silent. I brought everyone's attention to the TV, telling everyone my mom had been working on a project she wanted to show everyone. She had a confused, borderline worried look on her face, but I just smiled at her and mouthed at her, "Don't be a buzzkill." I then plugged in my USB drive. A USB drive filled with hundreds of embarrassing videos of her, all taken by me, all in the event that I needed to use them one day. There were videos of her getting cake smashed, screaming, raging about how the TV won't work, punching a wall because she ran out of ice cream, and many more embarrassing things. Guests erupted in laughter. I did too. But then, as I looked over at my mom, she wasn't just mad. She had steam coming out of her ears. And in that moment I knew I was gonna regret what I did. My mom didn't say anything while the video was playing or after, and actually just nervously laughed along, but I could tell by her tone during the rest of the day, she was mad. Everyone talking about the videos made her anger even funnier. However, the party eventually ended, and afterwards, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and dread. Everyone had left pretty quickly after my little video presentation, mostly mumbling awkward goodbyes without looking at any of us directly. I stayed in the living room, staring at the blank TV screen where my mom's embarrassing moments had just played. The silence that followed felt heavy. It didn't last long. Mom cornered me in the kitchen when I tried to escape to my room. Her face was this weird combination of pale and blotchy red at the same time. I'd never seen her look so angry. "You've crossed a line," she hissed, keeping her voice low even though everyone had left. "You think you're clever? You have no idea what you've started." I wanted to say something profound or cutting, but all I managed was, "You crossed the line first, with Julie." She gave me this look that honestly sent a chill down my spine, then walked away without another word. I stood there for a good 5 minutes, just trying to process what had happened. That's when I realized this wasn't over, not by a long shot. The next morning I came downstairs to find Dad eating breakfast alone. I grabbed some cereal and tried to act normal, hoping maybe we could just move past everything. "Your mother cried herself to sleep last night," he said after a few minutes of uncomfortable silence. My spoon froze halfway to my mouth. "Dad, do you have any idea what she did to me? To my relationship?" He just shook his head. "All I know is you humiliated her in front of all her friends. That video was cruel. And reading my private diary out loud wasn't?" I shot back. Dad sighed that deep, disappointed sigh that parents have somehow perfected. "You're an adult now. You need to be the bigger person." I wanted to argue more, but something in his expression stopped me. He looked tired, defeated almost. For the first time, I wondered if he was trapped in his own version of this mess, just trying to keep the peace. But still, I couldn't believe he was taking her side again. That afternoon, I sent Julie a long text explaining everything, about my mom's history of humiliation, the lies she'd told, all of it. I figured I had nothing to lose since she'd already blocked me everywhere else. To my surprise, she actually responded a few hours later. "Your whole family sounds toxic. I'm sorry for what you're going through, but I don't want any part of it. Please don't contact me again." That hurt worse than no response at all. Julie was right. My family was toxic, and now it had cost me someone I really cared about. I threw my phone across my bed and buried my face in my pillow, feeling that horrible mix of sadness and anger that's been my constant companion lately. When I got home from work that evening, something felt off immediately. My bedroom door was slightly ajar, even though I distinctly remembered closing it that morning. I always close my door. I pushed it open slowly and scanned the room. Nothing seemed out of place at first, but then I noticed my laptop was missing from my desk. I tore through the room looking for it, thinking maybe I'd left it somewhere else, but deep down, I knew. I found Mom in the living room, watching TV like nothing was wrong. "Where's my laptop?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. She barely looked up. "I have no idea what you're talking about. My laptop is missing from my room. Did you take it?" "Why would I take your laptop?" she asked, her voice dripping with fake innocence. "Maybe you left it somewhere. You've always been forgetful." I wanted to call her out, but I had no proof. And somehow, arguing with her always makes me look like the crazy one. I spent the next hour searching the house before finally finding my laptop tucked behind some boxes in the storage closet. I immediately checked to see if anything had been accessed, but couldn't tell for sure. That weekend, I installed a lock on my bedroom door. Dad saw me doing it and just shook his head, but didn't try to stop me. Mom made some comment about how only people with things to hide need locks, but I ignored her. I decided to reach out to my Aunt Lisa, my mom's sister. She's always been the more reasonable one in the family, and I thought maybe she could talk some sense into Mom. We met for coffee at a place near her house. "I understand you're upset," she said, after I explained everything that had happened. "But families should work these things out privately. The video was taking it too far." "Did you hear the part about her destroying my relationship?" I asked, feeling my frustration rise. "Or reading my diary out loud to her friends?" Aunt Lisa shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Your mother can be difficult, but she's still your mother." I left feeling even more alone than before. It was becoming clear that Mom had already spread her version of events through the family grapevine. In her telling, I was sure the diary incident was just a harmless joke, and I was the villain who humiliated her for no reason. The following Tuesday, I got a frantic call from my friend Zach. "Dude, did you post those weird childhood photos on your Instagram?" he asked. My stomach dropped. "What photos?" "There's like a dozen pictures of you as a kid in some Superman underwear and stuff. One looks like you wet the bed. People are commenting like crazy." I nearly crashed my car pulling over to check my phone. Sure enough, there they were. Humiliating childhood photos I didn't even know existed, posted to my account with captions like, "Throwback to simpler times," and "Some things never change." I deleted them immediately, hands shaking with rage and embarrassment. It took me less than 5 seconds to figure out who was responsible. Mom had obviously found my password somehow. I spent the next hour changing passwords on every account I had and setting up 2-factor authentication on everything. That night, I confronted her directly. "The Instagram photos? Really? That's your response?" She gave me a little smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about, but if something happened with your social media, maybe it was just giving you a taste of your own medicine." "I want a truce," I said, trying to be the mature one. "This has gone far enough on both sides." "Oh, now you want peace?" She laughed. "After what you did? I don't think so, honey. You started this war." That night, I packed up my most personal belongings, journals, keepsakes, important documents, and took them to my friend Alex's apartment for safekeeping. I didn't tell him exactly why, just that I was doing some spring cleaning. I couldn't risk leaving anything else for her to find and use against me. Friday night, we were all at the dinner table in painfully awkward silence. I decided to try one more time to have a rational conversation. Can we please just talk about boundaries? I asked, keeping my voice calm. This situation is getting out of control. Before Mom could respond, Dad jumped in. I think we all need to calm down and move past this. Family is family. I agree, Mom said sweetly. Then she turned to Dad. Oh, by the way, I found some interesting messages on his phone the other day. Want to see what our son was saying to that Julie girl? Pretty graphic stuff. I froze. You went through my phone? Those messages are private. She pulled out her own phone and started showing Dad screenshots. Screenshots of intimate conversations between me and Julie. I felt sick. I pushed my chair back from the table so hard it fell over behind me. My appetite was completely gone, replaced by a knot of anxiety and rage. I left without another word and drove around for hours just to avoid going home. The next morning, I went out to my car to find all 4 tires completely flat. Upon closer inspection, I could see they'd been slashed. Each one had a small, deliberate cut in the sidewall. I couldn't prove Mom did it, but the timing was too coincidental. I had to use my emergency savings to pay for new tires. I had been carefully building this fund with overtime shifts, hoping to eventually move out. Now I was back to square one financially. The repair shop guy told me it looked like someone had used a small knife, carefully puncturing each tire in a way that couldn't be patched. Things were escalating faster than I could handle. I started picking up extra shifts at work, hoping to save enough to get my own place as soon as possible. But when I showed up that Monday, my manager called me into his office. Your mom called me yesterday, he said, looking concerned. She mentioned you've been going through some mental health issues, said you might need reduced hours for a while. I sat there in shock. What? I'm fine. I've been asking for more hours, not fewer. He gave me this look of pity that made my skin crawl. She sounded really worried about you, said you've been having episodes. He pushed a pamphlet for the company's employee assistance program across the desk. Maybe take a few days off? Use some of your PTO? Instead of more shifts, I ended up with fewer. I couldn't even explain the real situation without sounding completely unhinged. Who would believe that my middle-aged mother was systematically destroying my life because I showed some embarrassing videos of her at a party? I tried talking to Alex about everything that was happening, hoping for some support or advice. We met at a bar near his place, but he seemed weird from the moment I arrived. Your mom called me, he said after his first beer. My heart sank. What did she say? She's really worried about you, man. Said you've been having these explosive anger episodes, that you destroyed a bunch of stuff in your room. He looked uncomfortable. She said sometimes you talk about hurting yourself or others. None of that is true, I said, feeling a familiar helplessness wash over me. She's making it all up because of this fight we're having. Alex just nodded, but I could tell he didn't fully believe me. Maybe you should get some professional help, just to talk to someone? I realized then that Mom was systematically cutting off all my support systems one by one. She was telling everyone in my life that I was unstable, making it impossible for me to explain the truth without sounding exactly like the person she was describing. That night, I created a detailed document recording all of her behaviors with dates, times, and witnesses when possible. I figured if things continued to escalate, I might need evidence of what was really happening. I password protected the file and saved it to a cloud drive she couldn't access. Somehow, Dad found out about my document. He confronted me in the garage as I was coming home from work. Your mother found out you're keeping some kind of list about her, he said, looking genuinely upset. Are you building a case against your own family? What's wrong with you? How did she even know about that? I asked, though I already suspected she'd somehow monitored my computer activity. That's what you're concerned about? Not the fact that you're documenting your mother's behavior like she's some kind of criminal? The tension at home became unbearable after that. Mom would enter rooms and immediately leave if I was there. Dad barely spoke to me. I felt like I was living with strangers who hated me. I decided to stay with my cousin Rachel for a few days just to get some space. She lived about 30 minutes away and had always been pretty cool. She agreed immediately when I asked, saying I could crash on her couch for as long as I needed. I had been there for exactly 2 days when the doorbell rang while Rachel was at work. I opened the door without thinking and found Mom standing there, tears streaming down her face. How could you do this to me? She sobbed, loud enough that I was sure the neighbors could hear, spreading lies about me to the whole family. After everything I've done for you. Rachel's neighbor had come out onto her porch and was watching the whole scene with obvious interest. I tried to close the door, but Mom pushed her way inside. Mom, you need to leave, I said, keeping my voice down. This isn't the place for this conversation. Not the place? She practically shouted. You've turned my own niece against me. What lies have you been telling her? When Rachel got home that evening, she found Mom and me in a standoff in her living room. Mom had refused to leave, saying she needed to clear things up with Rachel directly. She'd spent hours painting me as unstable and vindictive, while I tried to defend myself without making things worse. Rachel looked exhausted as she asked, "Can you both please just go? I don't want to get involved in this family drama." But I started to protest. "I'm sorry," Rachel cut me off. "I can't have this in my house. Whatever's going on between you two needs to be worked out somewhere else." I packed my few belongings while Mom stood in the doorway with a satisfied expression. I had lost another safe place. When I returned home, I discovered Mom had gone through the remainder of my possessions under the guise of organizing my room. Several sentimental items were damaged. A model ship I'd built with my grandfather had pieces broken off, and pages were missing from my high school yearbook. Nothing that looked deliberate enough to prove malice, but I knew. That's when I realized I needed to be smarter about this. Getting angry and reactive wasn't working. It was just making me look exactly like the unstable person she was describing to everyone. I needed to be strategic. I ordered a small security camera disguised as a charging clock and set it up in my bedroom. The footage uploaded directly to a secure cloud account. If she was going to go through my things, at least I'd have proof. Somehow, she figured it out within days. I came home to find Dad waiting for me, arms crossed. "Your mother found a camera in your room," he said sternly. "You're spying on your own family now?" "I'm not spying on anyone," I replied. "I'm trying to protect my personal space from invasion." "This is our house," Dad said, his voice rising. "We don't need your permission to enter any room under our roof. Your mother feels violated by this. If you can't respect our privacy, maybe you should find somewhere else to live." The irony of him talking about privacy while defending Mom's right to go through my personal belongings was almost laughable. "Almost. Remove the camera today," he said firmly, "or we'll have a more serious conversation about your living situation." I took down the camera but didn't give up. I needed allies, evidence, and ultimately, a way out of this house for good. I tried one last time to reach out to Julie. I sent her screenshots of conversations where Mom had mentioned contacting her, hoping it would prove I wasn't making things up. The response came from someone else. "This is Amber, Julie's roommate. She asked me to tell you to stop contacting her. Your constant messages are freaking her out. She doesn't want to be part of your family drama." I stared at the message for a long time. From Julie's perspective, I probably did seem obsessive and weird. First my anger issues that Mom had told her about, then these desperate messages trying to explain everything. I had to accept that relationship was destroyed beyond repair, another casualty in this war I never wanted. The next week, a family dinner was scheduled at my aunt and uncle's house. I decided to go, hoping that in a public setting, things might stay civil. Maybe some semblance of normalcy could be salvaged. I should have known better. Mom spent the entire dinner making pointed remarks about ungrateful children and how some people don't appreciate their parents until it's too late. Every comment was carefully constructed to seem innocent to others while sending a clear message to me. No one else seemed to notice the tension, or if they did, they ignored it. I excused myself early, claiming a headache. As I was leaving, my cousin Mike followed me out to my car. "Hey, is everything okay between you and your mom?" he asked. Things seemed weird in there. I hesitated, unsure how much to share. "We're going through some stuff right now. It's complicated." Mike nodded thoughtfully. "Look, I don't want to get in the middle of anything, but Aunt Karen has always been kind of a manipulator. Everyone in the family knows it, but we've all just learned to live with it." I felt a sudden rush of validation, hearing someone else acknowledge what I'd experienced my whole life. "Why doesn't anyone ever say anything?" I asked. Mike shrugged. "It's easier not to rock the boat, I guess. When people have tried in the past, it never ends well for them." He gave me a sympathetic pat on the shoulder. "Just be careful, okay? She doesn't fight fair." That conversation with Mike was a turning point. For the first time, I understood that I wasn't crazy or oversensitive. Other people had seen Mom's behavior too. They just chose the path of least resistance. Later that week, I was in the kitchen when I overheard Mom on the phone in the next room. I froze when I heard my name. "I'm really worried about him," she was saying, her voice dripping with concern. "His behavior is becoming increasingly erratic. The anger outbursts, the paranoia. I'm afraid he might be becoming unstable." I quietly pulled out my phone and started recording, stepping closer to the doorway. "No, we haven't had him evaluated yet, but I'm thinking it might be necessary soon. His father and I are at our wits' end. We're walking on eggshells in our own home." Every word was a calculated lie, but delivered with such convincing emotion that anyone would believe her. I kept recording until she hung up, then saved the file to my secure cloud account. Evidence. I started applying for apartments that week. I found a small one-bedroom across town that was just within my budget. The application process went smoothly, and the landlord seemed ready to approve me. Then she called and said there had been a concerning phone call about me, and she didn't feel comfortable renting to someone with those kinds of issues. Mom had somehow found out about my application and sabotaged it. I was running out of options and beginning to feel genuinely trapped. That night, I decided to confront Dad privately. I caught him alone in the garage where he was working on his car, something he often did to escape the tension in the house. "Dad, we need to talk about what Mom's doing," I said, closing the garage door behind me. "She's actively trying to destroy my life now. She got me rejected from an apartment today." Dad sighed and put down his wrench. He suddenly looked much older than his 57 years. "Your mother, she has her ways of dealing with things." "This isn't dealing with things," I argued. "This is systematic destruction of my relationships, my reputation, my independence. Don't you see how wrong this is?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Of course I see it," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've seen it for 30 years. The admission hit me like a physical blow. Then why don't you stop her? Why do you always take her side?" "Because it's easier," he said simply. "Because when I don't, she does the same things to me that she's doing to you now. I learned a long time ago that opposing her directly only makes things worse." I stared at him, seeing my father in a completely new light. He wasn't just an enabler. He was another victim who had simply found a way to survive. "I can't live like this," I told him. "I won't." He nodded slowly. "I know, and you shouldn't have to." Over the next few days, I noticed Mom taking photos of me around the house with her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. Once, I caught her reflection in the TV screen as she quickly snapped a picture of me eating breakfast, then started typing something. I began strictly monitoring what I said and did at home. I kept conversations minimal and avoided being in common areas when possible. I was essentially living like someone in witness protection, careful not to leave any information or behavior that could be weaponized against me. One evening, I received a call from my Uncle Robert, my dad's brother who lived about 3 hours away. We weren't particularly close, but he had always been nice to me at family gatherings. "Your dad called me," he said after some awkward small talk. He's worried about you. My heart sank, assuming this was another flying monkey sent by Mom to lecture me about respecting my parents. Look, Uncle Robert continued, I don't know exactly what's going on, but I gather things are pretty toxic there right now. I wanted to offer you my guest room if you need somewhere to stay for a while. I was stunned by the unexpected lifeline. That's really generous, but your place is 3 hours from my job. I can't commute that far. I understand, but the offer stands if you need it. Sometimes you have to prioritize your mental health over convenience. I thanked him sincerely, touched by his support even though I couldn't accept it. The fact that Dad had reached out to him secretly gave me a small hope that maybe Dad was finally trying to help in his own way. I created a separate email account to communicate privately with family members I trusted, hoping to gradually build a support network. I was careful to use a strong password and only access it from my phone. It worked for about a week before Mom somehow gained access. She must have installed spyware on my phone when I wasn't looking. She sent embarrassing emails to several relatives pretending to be me, including one to my grandmother that contained bizarre sexual references. I spent the next day calling everyone who had received these emails, explaining what had happened and apologizing profusely. Some believed me. Others clearly thought I was making excuses for my own weird behavior. The damage control was exhausting. The next morning, I came downstairs to find Mom at the kitchen table, sorting through a pile of mail, my mail. Several envelopes were already opened. What are you doing? I demanded. Those letters are addressed to me. She barely looked up. I'm just making sure you didn't miss any important bills. You've been so distracted lately. I gathered up my mail, including the opened envelopes. One was from my doctor, another from my bank. I felt violated all over again. The next day, I rented a P.O. box and filled out change of address forms for all my important mail. I wouldn't put it past her to call the post office and try to reverse it somehow, but at least it was another small step toward independence. Zach invited me out for drinks that weekend, which felt like a much-needed break from the psychological warfare at home. We were having a good time until he suddenly looked uncomfortable. So, your mom came by the store yesterday, he said, not meeting my eyes. Zach worked at an electronics shop in the mall. My stomach dropped. What did she want? She said she was concerned about you, that you've been having a hard time lately and she's worried you might be a danger to yourself or others. He fidgeted with his beer glass. She wanted to know if you'd said anything concerning to me. I closed my eyes, feeling utterly defeated. And what did you tell her? That I hadn't noticed anything unusual, he said. But dude, she was really convincing. If I didn't know you, I might have believed her. I nodded, forcing a smile I didn't feel. Thanks for having my back. But I could see it in his eyes. The seed of doubt had been planted. Zach was now another person looking at me with that mixture of concern and suspicion, wondering if maybe there was some truth to what my mother was saying. The walls were closing in. Every support system I had was being systematically compromised. Everyone I knew was either openly against me or harboring doubts about my stability, and I was still no closer to escaping the toxic environment that was slowly crushing me. I needed a new strategy. I needed allies who understood exactly what I was dealing with. Most of all, I needed a way out that Mom couldn't sabotage. The war was far from over, but I was starting to see that conventional tactics wouldn't work against someone willing to burn everything down, including themselves, to maintain control. After my talk with Zach, I sat in my car in the parking lot for a long time, just staring at nothing. This situation was completely out of control. Mom was systematically turning everyone against me, and I was running out of options fast. I needed to do something different, something she wouldn't expect. The next morning, I called my grandmother, Dad's mom, to see if maybe she could talk some sense into everyone. Grandma Rose had always been pretty no-nonsense, and I hoped she might actually listen to me. Your mother has always been a bit dramatic, Grandma said when I explained the situation, but she's just showing her love in her own way. All mothers embarrass their children sometimes. I nearly hung up right there. Grandma, this isn't normal embarrassment. She read my private diary at her birthday dinner. She called my girlfriend and told her I had violent tendencies. She sabotaged job interviews and apartment applications. Well, I'm sure she's just worried about you making good choices, Grandma replied, clearly not getting it. I took a deep breath and made a decision. Grandma, I have recordings and screenshots. Would you be willing to look at them before you make up your mind? There was a long pause. Bring them over this afternoon, she finally said. I spent the next couple hours organizing my evidence. The recording of Mom lying about me on the phone, screenshots of the fake emails she'd sent pretending to be me, photos of my slashed tires, everything. I even had pictures of my opened mail. When I showed Grandma everything, her face changed. She went from skeptical to confused to genuinely shocked. I had no idea it was this bad, she said quietly. This isn't normal, sweetheart. This isn't how mothers behave. For the first time in forever, I felt validated. Someone actually believed me. Grandma Rose was not one to sit on information. She invited herself to Sunday dinner that weekend and confronted Mom directly at the table. Karen, I've seen the evidence of how you've been treating your son, she said calmly. The sabotage, the invasion of privacy, the lies to his friends. This needs to stop immediately. Mom's face went through about 15 emotions in 2 seconds before settling on victim. Her eyes instantly filled with tears. How could you believe such terrible things about me? I've been nothing but loving and supportive. He's turning everyone against me with these lies. Dad immediately jumped in. Mom, you don't understand what's been happening. He humiliated your daughter-in-law in front of her friends. He's been disrespectful and paranoid. He needs to apologize for upsetting his mother, Dad continued, pointing at me. Either respect your mother or find somewhere else to live. You have 1 week. I looked at Grandma, hoping she'd continue defending me, but she just squeezed my hand under the table. The message was clear. This wasn't a battle we could win right now. That night, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Hey, this is Rachel's cousin Sarah. She gave me your number. Call me when you can." I remembered Rachel mentioning her cousin Sarah a few times, but had never met her. I called the number, curious, but cautious. "Rachel told me what's going on with your mom," Sarah said once I'd introduced myself. "I went through something similar with my mom about 5 years ago. That's why I moved across the country." We talked for almost 2 hours. Sarah explained how her mother had similar controlling behaviors, though not quite as extreme as Mom's. She had cut contact completely after her mother tried to get her fired from her job by making up stories about drug use. "The thing is," Sarah explained, "people like our mothers follow a pattern. They're likely narcissists. There's actually support groups for people with narcissistic parents. It was like someone had thrown me a life preserver in the middle of the ocean. I wasn't alone. This was a real thing that happened to other people. I wasn't crazy or oversensitive or any of the things I'd been told my whole life." Sarah connected me with an online support group, and I started attending virtual meetings. For the first time, I heard story after story that mirrored my own experiences. These people understood exactly what I was going through without me having to convince them or provide evidence. Unfortunately, Mom somehow found out about the group. I have no idea how. Maybe she installed some kind of spyware on my phone, or maybe she just guessed based on my browser history. Either way, she started telling family members I had joined a cult and was being brainwashed against my family. I had to spend hours explaining to concerned relatives what the support group actually was. Some believed me, some didn't. The division in the family was growing wider by the day. Meanwhile, I was scrambling to find somewhere to live before Dad's 1-week deadline expired. Grandma Rose offered me her spare room, but she lived in a seniors-only community that wouldn't allow long-term stays from someone my age. I could crash there for 2 weeks max while finding something permanent. I started packing up my essential belongings whenever the house was empty. I figured I'd move the most important stuff first, then come back for the rest later if possible. I was carefully sorting through my closet when Mom came home unexpectedly. "What are you doing?" she demanded, eyes narrowing at the half-filled box on my bed. "Just organizing some stuff," I said, trying to sound casual. "He's stealing family heirlooms," Mom shouted, immediately running to find Dad. "Come quick, he's taking things that don't belong to him." Dad made me unpack everything right in front of them, item by item, to prove I wasn't taking anything that wasn't mine. It was humiliating and infuriating, having to justify ownership of my own clothes and belongings. The next evening, my aunt witnessed Mom's behavior firsthand during a video call. I had called to ask if I could possibly stay with her for a while, and Mom barged into my room without knocking, snatching the phone from my hand. "He's being dramatic again," Mom told my aunt with an eye roll. "Apparently we're such terrible parents that he can't stand living here anymore." I expected my aunt to see through this, but she just looked uncomfortable. "I'm sure it's just a phase," she said. "All families have rough patches." After the call, I realized I needed more consistent witnesses to Mom's behavior. Individual incidents could be explained away as a bad day or out of context, but a pattern would be harder to dismiss. I invited my cousin Rachel to stay for the weekend, hoping she'd see the dynamics for herself, but Mom must have sensed the trap. For the entire first day and a half, she was pleasant, charming, and completely normal. Rachel began giving me side eyes, clearly thinking I had exaggerated everything. Then, on Rachel's last night, Mom had a few glasses of wine. Her guard slipped, and she started making those familiar cruel jokes, this time about my failed romance with Julie. "He thought she was the one," Mom said with a mocking laugh, making air quotes. "But she ran for the hills when she found out what he's really like." "Smart girl," Rachel immediately spoke up. "Aunt Karen, that's a pretty mean thing to say about your son." Mom's face darkened. "I see he's gotten to you too. Everyone's ganging up on me in my own house." She stormed off to her bedroom, slamming the door like a teenager. Rachel looked at me with wide eyes. "Wow, has she always been like that?" "My whole life," I said quietly. Rachel helped me secure a small studio apartment through her friend who worked at a property management company. The downside was, it wouldn't be available for another month. I still needed to survive at home for 4 more weeks. I was meticulously documenting every interaction with Mom in a password-protected cloud file. One day, I left my computer briefly to take a shower, forgetting to lock it. When I came back, something felt off about the way my browser tabs were arranged. After some digging, I discovered keylogging software had been installed on my laptop. Mom had been monitoring everything I typed, passwords, private messages, journal entries, everything. The invasion of privacy was so complete, it made me physically sick. I immediately bought a new laptop with my emergency credit card and kept it hidden at Rachel's apartment. This meant I could only work on my online courses when I visited Rachel, which wasn't often enough. My grades started slipping, adding financial aid concerns to my growing mountain of problems. Mom noticed I wasn't using my old laptop anymore and confronted me in the kitchen. "Why aren't you using your computer lately? Got something to hide?" she asked with fake casualness. "I know about the keylogger, Mom," I said calmly, watching her reaction. Her face fell for just a second before she recovered. I have no idea what you're talking about. This paranoia of yours is concerning, but I saw it. That brief flash of shock when she realized I'd caught her. For once, I felt like I had the upper hand in our psychological warfare. A few days later, Dad approached me when Mom was out shopping. Look, he said awkwardly, I've seen some concerning behavior from your mother lately. The computer thing, the phone calls to your work, it's getting out of hand. My heart leapt. Was Dad finally going to stand up for me? But, he continued, crushing my hope, I need you to keep the peace until you move out. Just a few more weeks. Can you do that for me? I realized then that Dad was afraid of Mom, but would never actually confront her. He was asking me to be the sacrificial lamb to keep his own life tolerable. The next day, Mom announced she'd arranged a family counseling session. For a moment, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe she was finally acknowledging there was a problem. That hope died when I arrived at the appointment and discovered it wasn't with a licensed therapist at all, but with her personal friend, who worked as a life coach. The entire setup was obviously designed to gang up on me. I refused to participate and walked out. Mom retaliated by telling relatives I'd refused professional help, but by this point, Grandma Rose had already shared my evidence with several family members. People were starting to question Mom's version of events, and she was losing control of the narrative. 3 weeks before my move-out date, Mom discovered my apartment plans through a misdirected email. Instead of confronting me directly, she called the landlord pretending to be a former landlord of mine, claiming I had damaged property and skipped out on rent. I almost lost the apartment until Rachel intervened, calling her friend and explaining the situation. The landlord was sympathetic but nervous about getting involved in family drama. It took Rachel personally vouching for me to secure the apartment again. 1 week before moving out, I checked my bank account and nearly had a heart attack. Almost $800 was missing. After calling the bank, I discovered someone had made several withdrawals using my debit card and PIN. Fortunately, I had moved most of my savings to a new account at a different bank after the slashed tires incident. Mom only got a relatively small amount, but it was proof of how desperate she was becoming. I confronted both parents about the missing money, making sure Grandma was present as a witness. I was teaching you financial responsibility, Mom said with a straight face. You've been so careless with money lately, buying a new laptop you don't need and wasting money on an apartment when you could live here for free. To my shock, Dad finally snapped. Karen, that's enough. Taking his money crosses a line. Mom looked at him like he'd grown a second head. In all my life, I had never seen Dad contradict her so directly. On moving day, several family members showed up to help. Grandma Rose, Rachel, Uncle Robert, who drove 3 hours to be there, and a couple of cousins. Mom locked herself in her bedroom and refused to come out or say goodbye. I left a letter for her explaining that I needed distance, but hoped for eventual reconciliation if she could acknowledge her behavior and work on healthier communication. I doubted it would make a difference, but it felt important to leave the door cracked open, even if just a little. The first few months in my new place were like learning to breathe again. I installed a security system with Rachel's help. I changed all my passwords and created new email accounts. I blocked Mom's number but kept Dad's open, though our conversations were brief and superficial. 6 months after moving out, I got a text from an unknown number. It's Mom. Can we meet for coffee? Neutral location of your choice. My first instinct was to ignore it completely, but after talking it through with my support group, I decided to respond with clear boundaries. I insisted that Rachel be present and that we meet at a public cafe near her workplace rather than my neighborhood. To my surprise, Mom agreed to everything. The meeting was tense and awkward. Mom started off defensive, making comments about how I had abandoned the family and broken her heart. But when I calmly stated I would leave if she continued with accusations, something shifted. I miss you, she said, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. I don't understand why things got so bad between us. I can explain it to you again if you're actually willing to listen, I replied. For the first time in my life, she nodded and stayed quiet. I explained how her constant humiliation had affected me, how her invasion of my privacy and sabotage of my relationships had destroyed my trust. I told her I knew about the keylogger, the bank withdrawals, the calls to my workplace and landlord. She started to deny some of it, then stopped herself. I thought I was protecting you, she said finally, but I can see now that I was really just trying to control you. It wasn't a perfect apology. There were still deflections and moments where she tried to justify her actions, but it was the most honest conversation we'd ever had. We've met a few more times since then, always with Rachel or another buffer person present. Mom has started seeing an actual therapist, though I don't know what they discuss. Dad calls more regularly now, and we've managed a few one-on-one lunches without Mom being the center of the conversation. I don't know if we'll ever have what might be considered a normal family relationship. The damage runs deep, and trust rebuilds slowly, if at all. But for the first time, we're interacting as adults, rather than as controller and controlled. Last week, Mom texted to ask if she could see my new apartment. I haven't said yes yet. Some boundaries need to stay firm longer than others, but the fact that she asked instead of just showing up unannounced feels like progress. Small, imperfect progress, but progress nonetheless. Whatever happens with my family going forward, I know now that I can trust my own perceptions. I'm not crazy or oversensitive. I deserve respect and privacy. And most importantly, I'm capable of building a life where those things are the norm, not the exception. If she crosses my boundaries again, I won't hesitate to step back, but I'm cautiously optimistic that maybe, just maybe, we've found a way to coexist without constant warfare. Only time will tell.